Yes, and the British Red Cross is facing quite a bit of backlash. Why? Because it's published a new inclusive language guide, which critics say prioritises political correctness over its core mission.
Well, the guide advises staff to avoid traditional terms like ladies and gentlemen and maiden name in favour of more inclusive language.
Is maiden name sexist? I don't know.
Or belittling?
Belittling, perhaps. Critics, including politicians and members of the public, argue the charity has been hijacked by political extremists, distracting it from its humanitarian focus with unnecessary and divisive changes.
Well, joining us now is the head of campaigns at the Taxpayers Alliance, Elliot Keck. And Elliot, of course, you're from the Taxpayers Alliance. This is important because the Red Cross receives quite a bit of taxpayer money.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Tom. Obviously, this is not a public sector organisation. It's not a quango. It's not a ministerial department. It's a independent charity, but it does receive an absolutely huge amount of its budget from taxpayers. It's about £400 million over the last 5 years. It normally averages somewhere around a quarter of its budget every year from taxpayers. So what it does with that money is, of course, very important. And the British Red Cross does an extraordinary amount of very, very important work and is generally deserving of those taxpayer receipts. But I think what was revealed today in the Daily Mail is worrying. It does show that there is a potential takeover by some extreme forces inside the organisation.
Yes, it's a bit bizarre that they feel the need to do this stuff, isn't it? And I wonder how much these kind of language guides actually end up costing the charity and perhaps the taxpayer even, because, you probably have to consult on what's inclusive enough when it comes to language. It probably has to be updated every year.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Language is always changing around these issues and often completely unbeknownst to the people that then have to use that language. For example, I had never heard the term minoritized ethnic group before, but according to this inclusive language guide, that's now the appropriate term to use. And of course, when it actually delves into some even more troubling things like issues around the use of single-sex facilities. And we've seen these inclusive language guides across the actual public sector as well. We know that they have caused a lot of trouble for staff and employees. And, it does concern me, and it should concern everybody, that the British Red Cross is spending potentially quite large amounts of time on what are pretty radical areas of political discussion, rather than on its core focus of delivering humanitarian support to those that need it.
So, Elliot, there's minoritised ethnic group. Is minority ethnic group now offensive? I genuinely can't keep up with this stuff. This is a linguistic minefield. Perhaps we do need these language guides after all. Otherwise
no.
We're going to be treading on landmines.
Well, I suppose if it stops people from getting into trouble, but I think I'd rather an organisation that receives such large amounts of taxpayers' money, I think I'd rather them be a bit more generous to their staff and to their volunteers. Assume that actually, if you're working at the British Red Cross and volunteering for the British Red Cross, it's likely that you have pretty good intentions, and maybe we should be slightly more forgiving on the language that people use.
Elliot, ordinary people, it must feel very stifling to work at some of these organisations. Being told that terms like elderly, youngster and pensioner should be shunned to head off potentially negative stereotypes. Or you can say everyone, folk or all, because that's inclusive, but you may want to say they or them in certain situations, and always refer to women, girls and people who menstruate, as to not exclude transgender people. Anyway, Elliot, we're going to have to leave it there, actually. But thanks for talking us through all this. I'm just having a look at all the words that we're going to be banned from saying in the future. Thank you, Elliot Keck, campaigns manager at the Taxpayers Alliance, or head of campaigns. Yes.